Presentation number 2, IEP terminology. Considering the big picture and the IEP document, what it is and what it is not. What analogy or metaphor would you use to describe what an IEP is? The big picture and the IEP document. The product, or the IEP, is developed during the process, which should be the dialogue. The IEP is not a form. The IEP should be viewed as a process, with the IEP document being only one of its elements. So what could we use to describe that? Let's think about a building analogy. We have the blueprint for building a house. We have the plans that go into it, and ultimately we will end up with a building. But we start with the blueprint. In special education, we are creating a structure, or a building in the case of our analogy, to support access to and participation in general education, non-academic activities, and extracurricular activities. Which of these do you most often think about? What are some examples of extracurricular activities? What are some examples of non-academic activities? Why are those important for the well-being of a child? So here we have our big picture of what we are building. I'm not a builder, a developer, an architect, or anything of the sort, but I do know that if a house does not have a solid blueprint, it's probably not going to have a solid foundation. In the same way, to support a student with a disability to have access to and participation in the general education curriculum, non-academic activities, and extracurricular activities, a team needs to establish a plan and a setting. Let's carry the metaphor a bit further. A few years ago, I was watching the new Viking Stadium go up. I heard the news stories about the construction crews, and I saw the cranes putting up the supports for the building. In a similar way, students with disabilities need a team of people building and implementing systematic, well-developed, and research-based supports to ensure their progress in the general education curriculum, those non-academic activities, and extracurricular activities. Let's look at this big picture a bit more. It's important in building a structure like our home or the Viking Stadium that the proper materials and procedures are used, just like in building supports for students. The foundation of our work is the free, appropriate public education. Let's look at an example of Becky. She is 7, smart and eager to learn. She has special health care needs, specifically juvenile diabetes, that adversely affect her educational performance. What do you think would be 2 critical elements that Becky will need in school so that her diabetes doesn't interfere with her learning? Go ahead and jot those down. Freedom to eat in class and elsewhere, school health services, specific arrangements for field trips and special events, specific arrangements for absences from school. So let's dig into the actual IEP document. Let's first look at a completely blank IEP. You should have downloaded this from the Moodle site. Starting at the beginning, find where the information on this slide would be included on the blank form. If we're using the building analogy, this provides the setting and crew information. Now look for the present levels of academic performance, academic and functional performance, goals, and reporting. We get our present level of performance from an evaluation, the student's classroom record, from teachers and parents. Then we have our annual goals and short-term objectives, and measuring and reporting. Next, I want you to look for the services and modifications. This would be more along the lines of the blueprint, the setting, and the crew. So who, when, and where are things going to take place on the IEP? Will there be adaptive equipment needed? How about special transportation? Will the student qualify for extended school year, or what we often refer to as ESY? What program modifications may be needed for general and special education? Where is the least restrictive environment information included? Assessments will the student participate in, and at what level? What requirements will this student meet for graduation? And the fifth area is transition. This becomes more of a specialized blueprint because this is only for our students ages 14 to 21 in the state of Minnesota. Transition areas are infused throughout the IEP document and specifically on some of the transition pages. Our purpose here is to focus on the life plans the student has after high school and the steps needed to get there. I'd like you to take the IEP you chose and read it out loud, stopping after each major section so you can simply let it soak in. I want you to determine 3 strengths of the IEP document and 1 question or suggestion for improvement. Post this in the weekly discussion forum entitled IEP Activity. The purpose of this activity is to familiarize yourself with a typical IEP document. And next week, you'll be reading an evaluation report to determine what goes into the IEP. I hope you have a big, blessed week.